Hi, everybody, and welcome back to Ivy English. I'm Karen.
And I'm Chris Gorski.
Today is November 18th, and please turn to page 50. That's a nice even number for us. Page 50 in your magazines. Today we're going to hear part 2 of the article that we started yesterday about the very, very famous story of the supernatural by a famous early American writer called Washington Irving. The story is called Rip Van Winkle.
Okay, let's talk about this. So I like Washington Irving, and he's responsible for a lot of great Americanisms, meaning phrases we own that were invented in America. For example, the almighty dollar. That's a great one.
I didn't know that.
But he is also responsible for the idea that people in the past thought the world was flat, and only Christopher Columbus knew the world was round. This was not true.
Or thought the world was round.
They thought the world...
He thought the world was round, but he was actually wrong, is what Washington Irving was saying, right?
Washington Irving said this: only Christopher Columbus knew the world was round. Everybody else thought it was flat. Everybody else thought you would sail to the edge of the world and fall off. That was what Washington Irving invented. That was not a true belief in the past. In fact, every educated person since 240 BC, over 2,200 years ago, calculated the world within 2 or 3% of the world's true circumference. The circumference is the width of the world on its outer edge. So the middle line around the Earth, the distance, the equator, how wide the world really truly is. Everybody has known this through simple geometry. But Washington Irving was a storyteller, not a historian. But when he wrote this history of Christopher Columbus, he invented the story that we still deal with today. Let's be clear, everyone. Nobody thought the world was flat for over 2,000 years.
And in addition, he actually believed that the Earth was flat? He wasn't convinced that it was round?
No. He knew the world was round. He just wanted to make Christopher Columbus a greater, bigger hero. And in fact, we see this everywhere in the U.S., where we have schools and stadiums and states and places named after Columbus. We wanted to make him this great hero. And he didn't need to do that, but he just made it up. He just invented the story.
So you're not really blaming him for the flat Earth people?
Yes, I am. I am blaming him for the flat Earth people.
Even though he himself believed the world was round?
Yes, but he created that story that today people think the world was flat, and they point to his story.
Really?
To his story. They point to the history of Christopher Columbus. Well, it's a history. It was written by Washington Irving, but it was not a factual. I mean, let's say this. Christopher Columbus was the first person to fly to the moon. Chris Gorski said so. And would anybody believe that? No, because I'm not Washington Irving. I hope not.
There are people who believe the weirdest things. But anyway, go on.
Anyways, that's what I just want to get out of the way. If you've heard that the people thought the world was flat, that is false.
Oh, so Chris is saying that people misread Washington Irving.
No, he explicitly said people thought the world was flat.
People believed it, but they were using that as a basis or as an excuse for continuing to believe that the world was flat, even though Washington Irving himself did not believe it was flat.
That's right.
I get it now. Okay, so I can understand your irritation. Okay, back to our text.
Let's back to our story.
That's right. Okay, here's our first paragraph. Remember, our title is Rip Van Winkle. One of the town's oldest residents, Peter Vanderdonk, overhears their discussion. He vouches for Rip's identity and says the men Rip met in the mountains were probably ghosts. Rip's daughter and her husband agree to take him in. Rip becomes a popular storyteller in the village when people hear about his tale. He's a senior citizen now, so no one bothers him about being lazy. Over time, the townspeople get him up to speed on the Revolutionary War and all of the events he slept through.
Rip Van Winkle is a fascinating story that serves as an argument against the American dream. The dream is the idea that Americans should strive to get wealthy through hard work and sacrifice. By contrast, Rip lacks ambition and doesn't want to work at all. Although he sleeps through the most important moment of U.S. history, he couldn't care less. In the end, he's happier than ever living a simple life, free from his wife's constant complaining. Rip's long sleep also suggests that it's possible to escape the troubles and difficulties of our lives through our imagination. Rip somehow managed to dream his unpleasant life away and wake up to a better one.
Rip Van Winkle was written by the celebrated American author Washington Irving. Irving was born in New York City in 1783. As a young man, he gave up a career in law to become a writer. In addition to his famous nonfiction works, Irving also wrote many acclaimed travel and historical works. Aside from Rip Van Winkle, he is best known for his ghost tale, The Legend of Sleepy Hollow. Many words that Irving invented for his stories, like Gotham and Knickerbocker, are still used and associated with New York City to this day. Now, this is interesting. It should kind of make you salivate. Salivate, that means you have like water coming out of your mouth because it sounds so interesting. Or tantalize you. Tantalize, that means to tempt you. That means it sounds so interesting, you want to hear more, but they don't give you more. So tantalize is T-A-N-T-A-L-I-Z-E. T-A-N-T-A-L-I-C-E. To tantalize you. That means to tempt you, to want to find out more. Because the article is limited in length, you can't find out everything. So you can go online and find out more. Let's go back to the beginning. So remember in this story, Rip Van Winkle is really lazy. His wife, Dame, gets really angry at him all the time for not taking care of the family. Rip takes a walk into the woods with his dog, meets some men speaking a different dialect and playing and bowling in the mountains, and they offer him some beer. He helped them carry their keg of beer. And then he has some of the beer, and very quickly he falls asleep. But it was such a deep sleep, it lasted 20 years. And now when he wakes up, he's shocked to find out how things have changed. So that's the story. Let's get back into it. So our first sentence again. One of the town's oldest residents, Peter Vanderdonk, overhears their discussion. Now we have the pronoun their here. That means those people. Now who are those people? It's Rip Van Winkle and his daughter. So they are now talking, and someone else in the village, a very old person named Peter Vanderdonk, hears Rip speaking with his daughter. He vouches for Rip's identity and says the men Rip met in the mountains were probably ghosts. To vouch for somebody's identity, to vouch for something, that means to give your word. Say, I know this is true, and you tell everybody, I am sure and I guarantee this is true. To vouch for something, it's to be a witness to something.
It's literally an old French word where they called you to court to prove you owned a piece of land. You needed a piece of paper. This year we had that economic stimulus. I think you went to 7-Eleven or the post office and you gave them $1,000 and they gave you $3,000, I think.
Did you get yours?
A voucher. Yes, we did. I didn't want to buy anything. I just gave them to my wife. I don't even know what we bought.
Oh, I just got it yesterday. Yeah, so I was surprised. They said, well, are you the spouse of a Taiwanese? I go, no, I've got permanent residency here. She says, oh, let me check. Oh, you can get it. And
Give
then
me that money.
That's right. And then she explained why they have you give them $1,000 so that you'll be more motivated to actually spend it.
Yeah. That's a great way to do it.
That's right. Okay. To vouch for something, that means to give your personal word, your promise that something is true. Identity, that means who somebody really is, so that he tells the other people this is really Rip. You don't have to hesitate about that. And so he suggests that these people, these funny kind of people who Rip ran into in the mountains, he thinks they were actually probably spirits. They were ghosts. And he's trying to explain this really weird thing that happened with Rip. Rip's daughter and her husband agree to take him in. So now the daughter is convinced this really is my dad, and her husband is being a good son-in-law. Say, sure, we'll take care of your dad. We'll take him in. So now he has a place to stay. He has a home. His own home has fallen apart. He doesn't have any place to go back to, and his wife is gone. So he won't hear all that nagging anymore. Okay, to take somebody in, that means to ask somebody to come and stay with you, to live with you in your home for a while. Next sentence, Rip becomes a popular storyteller in the village when people hear about his tale. Now, the first question that popped into my mind is, okay, well, your story is a great story, but what happens when you finish telling that story? You have to have a follow-up.
There's also something I wanted to add to the word vouch here. So don't forget that this is a time before ID cards, before licenses and picture ID. So how does someone vouch? Well, most people were illiterate. You couldn't even sign your name. Illiterate means you don't know how to read. Many people didn't know how to write beyond a basic level. And so we use the phrase to make your mark. And that means to kind of leave an impression. Literally, the mark is sort of like the little stamps you have when you need to sign an official document. People in the American colonies and even today don't have that, so they would literally just draw a picture with their hand or many times famously just use an X.
That's right, and I've seen that happen with like a blind person. They could only sign with an X.
You just draw an X, and that was to make your mark or how a person would vouch. Sometimes it's the only way to prove who you really are.
That's right, and people have to believe the person who's vouching, but that's another matter. Okay, so he's now a popular storyteller, but beyond this story, I wonder if he came up with a lot of other interesting stories, because one story is not enough.
From 20 years ago, I mean, there wasn't a lot to do, right? So storytelling was a real thing. Well, the word of a traveling storyteller is a raconteur, and that was a thing, a bard. They would travel around singing. Maybe that's what Rip did? I don't know.
Or I guess he could talk about life 20 years ago because the younger people wouldn't know about it.
Yeah,
I guess so.
That
makes sense. He's a senior citizen now, so no one bothers him about being lazy.
He's such a terrible person.
I'm not that judgmental. Okay, to be a senior citizen means to be old. And just like Chris said earlier, it's not nice to say, oh, I heard your mom died. It sounds really awful and direct. So, oh, I'm sorry, I heard your mom passed away.
Yeah.
That's a little gentler. Instead of saying, oh, he's really old now, to call somebody a senior citizen is a politer way of saying
This is another good word. Anthony and I discussed this at Enjoy just a couple days ago. Senior citizen is a good word. Generally speaking, this is a person over the age of 65.
Okay, not there yet. All right, so no one bothers him about being lazy. That means that normally around age 65, a lot of people retire. And after you retire, you're not necessarily expected to continue working, although that's something I personally cannot imagine. Next sentence. Over time, the townspeople get him up to speed on the Revolutionary War and all of the events he slept through. To get somebody up to speed is a very recent expression. It existed when I was young, but it's still fairly recent, and it's also very colloquial. That means to bring somebody up to date, to tell him all the things that happened since we last talked. So these people told him all the stuff that happened while he was asleep, especially about the Revolutionary War, which was a huge turning point for America as a country, and then all the other things that happened while he was asleep.
Very briefly, the British call the American Revolutionary War the American War of Independence. People call wars by different names depending on which side you were on. It's always interesting to know those.
I think that's a fine name, the War of Independence.
I expected something different, but it's just from the other side.
And the Brits had to get used to it because it happened to many of their former colonies.
Absolutely. Let's go to paragraph 2 here. Rip Van Winkle is a fascinating story that serves as an argument against the American dream.
All right, this one kind of shocked me because I know this story well. Like I said, I performed in an operetta of Rip Van Winkle when I was in grade school. We never heard that. And an argument against the American dream that suddenly suggests that the American dream is negative. It's no good. But so many people talk about it with wonder in their eyes.
This is a capitalized phrase. We have capital A American, capital D dream. But the problem with me, the reason why I like the historical allegory, not just because I was a social studies teacher, the phrase American dream was coined. It was invented in 1931. So this may be a newer interpretation. I'm not saying that's wrong. Don't misunderstand me. But I am saying that it may be a second perspective. One that I'm, as a social studies teacher, is
a modern interpretation.
Right. There we go. Very nice.
All right. So the American dream is that anybody can achieve anything with hard work. That is basically the American dream. Now, for me, I am a workaholic. I feel like I'm always working. I probably am working less than I believe I am, but I feel like I'm always working. And to me, that's what makes my life so happy. I love work. What else would you do? It gives you meaning. It gives you purpose. Gives you a feeling of achievement. Why would the American dream not be good?
The dream is the idea that Americans should strive to get wealthy through hard work and sacrifice.
Now, isn't that what a lot of people believe when you talk about like East Asian cultures, so many cultures, especially East Asia, the Chinese, right? That's what they believe in. We will achieve through hard work.
Yeah, I like this word sacrifice, to give up something fun or good to get something else later.
Especially for your children. Parents will give up a lot. Maybe they have a good education, but they have to take a bad job just to get enough money so their children can have a better life.
By contrast, Rip lacks ambition and doesn't want to work at all.
So this is really the opposite of what you're supposed to do if you're working for the American dream. You're not supposed to be lazy, and you're not supposed to sit around doing nothing.
Although he sleeps through the most important moment of U.S. history, he couldn't care less.
This made me think of something else, and that is, in America, let's say that our politics right now are very complex. They're very difficult right now. There was somebody who, when this whole thing started, he said, I'm sick of this. I don't want to listen to this news cycle. I don't want to be part of this. He decided to go offline, to go live in the country. I think it was Ohio. He said, I'm not going to have contact with anybody. I don't care about the news. I am just going to live on my own. I'm going to grow my own food, and I don't want to hear about anything. I just don't want to have to live through this. I think he's still doing this.
Honestly, this news cycle has only grabbed me and pulled me down into it. I can't let it go.
That's the way it is for everybody. And he saw it right at the beginning, and he said, I'm out of this. Yeah. And I think about this guy often. I wonder how he's doing.
Maybe he's asleep for 20 years.
What he did say, he did talk to somebody at some point. He said, well, actually, I'm a little bored, but otherwise things are fine.
Yeah.
And I'm relieved to be away from all this. All right, so I guess Rip is like that. Big deal. I missed this whole news cycle. Why would I want to be sucked into a news cycle?
In the end, he's happier than ever living a simple life, free from his wife's constant nagging. He's happy his wife's dead.
It's complaining, but it's nagging.
Oh, excuse me. Thank you. Yeah, complaining, nagging, two very good words.
Yeah, and so it's funny that you're the male. I would expect you to protect Rip more.
No.
I'm the female. And I can understand that men hate being nagged.
I want to. I
punch him in the face.
I don't like to be nagged either, right? But I think that he's also not doing his job. Like, your job is not to watch your wife do all the housework. Your job is to be there to support, right? This is a partnership. This is a team.
I think my issue is maybe Dame was exasperated, but I don't think her methods were very good methods. They were not very effective.
That's fair.
Let's continue.
Rip's long sleep also suggests that it's possible to escape the troubles and difficulties of our lives through our imagination.
Now, that's something I can identify with, because when there's a lot of unpleasant stuff going on, recently we had a lesson about pets becoming internet celebrities. So we escape into a world of imagination and of fun things like cute pets, and we give them funny captions. That's a survival technique, because if you just pay attention to the news cycle, you'll get really depressed. And one way of escaping that, besides internet pets, is just using your imagination and coming up with stories in an imaginary world.
Rip somehow managed to dream his unpleasant life away and life away and wake up to a better one. That's what's called a Freudian slip.
We better teach that, because that is so useful. Everybody knows who Freud was. He was an Austrian psychologist who came up with a lot of revolutionary theories, especially relating to stuff that goes back to our childhood and sexuality. So Freud was his name, and the adjective is Freudian, F-R-E-U-D. It's German. That's why I pronounce it Freud. I-A-N at the end makes it into an adjective. So Freudian psychology, that means psychology that follows the teachings of Freud. And we have something called a Freudian slip. That means when you make a mistake in speaking, that reveals what you're really thinking inside, and it often has to do with sex. Doesn't have to, but it can.
But yes, very much so. So here he dreams his unpleasant life away. I said wife because he clearly is not happy about his wife. Although some may say that secretly I'm unhappy about my wife, because I put that word here because it's my Freudian slip.
That's what some people might offer as an explanation or interpretation. But the important thing is Freudian slip. When you make a mistake in speaking, but it reveals something inside that you're not telling people.
While we're talking about Freud, I actually planned on mentioning him right here, actually. Freud also had another famous saying that sometimes a cigar is just a cigar, meaning that you could look at a cigar as meaning, again, like Karen suggested, something sexual. But this could just be a story about a lazy guy. This doesn't have to be about, well, Rip was America and Dame was England and the 20-year sleep was the Revolutionary War and he wakes up confused like America felt after the war. Or this just can be a story about a lazy guy that had a nagging wife and he went bowling with some ghosts and he went to sleep. And it's a fun story. And I think both views are honestly equally valid. Everything doesn't have to have a deeper meaning.
And he liked to smoke cigars. All right, we're moving on now to our third and final paragraph. Rip Van Winkle was written by the celebrated American author Washington Irving. We talked about him earlier, so this name is not new here. Watch out for celebrated. It does not mean that you're having a big party. It just means that people admire him and he's very famous, the celebrated American author. Next sentence, Irving was born in New York City in 1783. Very straightforward, but note in New York City in 1783. As a young man, he gave up a career in law to become a writer. That's true of a lot of writers. A lot of people started out in law, which later can help you in your writing because if you understand the law, you will know a lot of things about crime, and you can make more interesting stories that are more realistic. So a career, that's your big job that you have for most of your life. In addition to his famous nonfiction works, Irving also wrote many acclaimed travel and historical works. Now, he was actually a diplomat to Spain, and so he was very interested in Islam. And he wrote about Muhammad. He wrote a biography of Muhammad, and he has a famous work called the Alhambra, which is a great big fort, I believe, in Spain. So he was really interested in a lot of historical and cultural things as well in other countries. Aside from Rip Van Winkle, he is best known for his ghost tale, The Legend of Sleepy Hollow.
He actually wrote The Legend of Sleepy Hollow just a single year after he wrote Rip Van Winkle, so he definitely was on a hot streak.
This is a very fun story. If you haven't read it, I recommend it.
Sleepy Hollow?
The Sleepy Hollow, of course, Rip Van Winkle, too. That's the favorite story, but Sleepy Hollow is also fun. But I recommend reading a simplified version because Irving's writing is very difficult. All right. Many words that Irving invented for his stories, like Gotham and Knickerbocker, are still used and associated with New York City to this day. So Gotham is another word for New York City that's used in the Batman series.
And that's right. If you're a fan of DC Comics, you know Batman lives and fights crime in Gotham. But just to make this more complicated, Gotham is supposed to be New York City, but it was also modeled after Chicago, but Gotham is traditionally located in close by New Jersey.
That's interesting. I didn't know that.
Yeah, Batman is complex.
So if it's modeled after Chicago, is that because of all the crime?
I guess. I don't know the reason for that. I just know that the various authors of Batman moved the city around. But the design, the look of Gotham is supposed to be Chicago, but it's supposed to be placed in New Jersey close to New York.
And it's sort of identified with New York.
Yeah, there's even one of them that's like takes place in Canada.
Canada?
Because there's different universes. It's complex. It's comic books. It's not straightforward.
Okay, in closing, I recommend you get a simplified version of these two stories, Rip Van Winkle and The Legend of Sleepy Hollow by Washington Irving. Tune in next time. We'll see you then. Bye-bye.